You watch a lot of National Geographic, Kunal. Do you?
I used to. It used to pretty much be about all the wild animals attacking their prey, if that's one of those fun things. I think that's those are kind of videos that also go viral on Twitter and Instagram, right? A big animal attacking a small one,
Yeah.
or sometimes even a small one escaping if there's a big attack.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And we saw something similar today, didn't we? It's kind of like when you see those Lion King sort of documentaries on National Geographic, there are 15 minutes worth of the animal just chilling. And that's what we saw in the Spanish GP, the wild lion. Actually, the greatest lion in this sport, just chilling around, lazing around, his tail's wagging around here and there, just sipping some water. But then there's only one moment where he sees the prey and he has to attack the prey. Any later, and then the prey is gone. Giampiero Lambiasi came to Verstappen's ear and told him, Max, this is the right moment. You've got to make it work now. Guess what happened? He
Think
made it
wisely
work.
or act wisely. He
Think
even said that.
wisely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Think wisely. He didn't just think wisely, he attacked wisely and decisively. And, in Formula One, when you're watching the live broadcast, the moment where the prey gets attacked by the predator isn't quite showcased as many times. But had you taken Verstappen's move on Russell in a documentary, which Drive to Survive will do, man, it needs the cinematics because that is a proper race winning move, is it not, Kunal?
It is, and it is that one move that Max has attributed to for winning the race. Max has been actually, he's made a few post race statements saying, ultimately, we're not the fastest car. I would like to keep winning, but we won't always get it right when it comes to strategy, when it comes to overtakes. Of course, he was ceding that the McLaren was the quickest car at the Spanish Grand Prix. It was that overtake on George Russell, which Max credited to him winning the race, but also immediately after the overtake, the gap that he opened on
Yeah.
Lando Norris at the start of the race was eventually the cushion he could fall back on when Norris was slightly the quicker car at the end of the race. But Soumil, I have to add here, and I know you're
Hmm.
going to introduce the podcast after this, so maybe this is the time to
Yes.
put the wisest, my wisest outcome or my wisest thought from the race was I think Max was going to win either way. I think GP was just adding some artificial excitement to the Spanish Grand Prix, especially at that time when Lando's going all out. Well, Lando going all out was still just 3 tenths or 4 tenths of a lap quicker than Max Verstappen. Okay, and that means that to overcome a 5 second margin, you need more than 10 laps.
Yeah.
Okay, and there weren't more than 10 laps at that point. So I think it came pretty close. It wasn't as close as it was artificially enhanced, in my view.
No, wait. So are you telling me that Gianpiero Lambiasi's radio message was a lot like the fake commentary in Drive to Survive, but only done in real time and not in the studio?
You know what? Could be. But am I saying that he did it on purpose or anything? No, I just think
Nah, we're
that
just kidding. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. But even Max's tires going off at the end, etc. They knew their stint length. It's not that it was an 80 lap race which
yeah.
ended on lap 64. So they had done their calculations.
Wait. On this, it's so funny because Charles Leclerc said, and you told me this right before we went recording, we fell one lap short of getting that final position. Well, Red Bull didn't fall one lap short. They knew how long the race was and they planned it perfectly. But to think about this, Kunal, we're now in a world of Formula One where, firstly, Lando Norris is disappointed with second. It's a big thing. 12 months ago, this would have been news. And today, we're actually seeing a genuine race. And I truly believe that had Verstappen not made that one move at the right time on George Russell, and he claims the same as well when you listen to his post race debrief in the cool down room, he said, had it been one lap later, the car would have been completely off. The tires would have been too hot, performance wouldn't have been there, and the margin I had over Lando wouldn't have been there. And you know what the margin was at the end? 2.2 seconds. This is insane. I mean, yes, we saw a lot of tire management, but at the end, 2.2 seconds in a race, that is what we go racing for.
Incredible. And I think Max sort of did run out of tires. He said his tires were overheating, pushing at that particular pace. But in the end, Max Verstappen won the 1111th Formula One Grand Prix in history. So
Hey.
1-1-1-1 race in history, won by car number one. And also, Max
Rising
scored
number
his
one of
six
Formula One. One
one
wonders
one
if one
one
had one more year in Formula. No, just kidding.
one Pablo Montoya. He absolutely hated this joke when it happened on him. But also Max won his 61st Formula One Grand Prix, which also happens to be the 61st Spanish Grand Prix. If you combine
Oh,
all the Spanish Grand Prix that have happened, so lots of numerology working in Max Verstappen's favor, isn't it?
but
Not.
yeah, it is. It is. And before I tell you what was another key factor in Verstappen's win, let's first clear the air. You're not listening to some random Max Verstappen fans bantering, although sometimes it can end up being like that considering how good he is. This is the Inside Line F1 podcast. We're one of the top 1.5% of all the podcasts on Spotify. India's best sports podcast as well was awarded to us last couple of weeks ago. And the other voice you're hearing on the show is Kunal Shah, the former marketing head of the Force India Formula One team and a producer and consultant to the Viaplay Network's Formula One broadcasts. My name is Soman Arora. I'm the voice of the MotoGP Indian Grand Prix, which hopefully will happen next March, among many other things, including being the commentator and presenter for the Indian Racing League, Indian Supercross Championship, and so much more. But interestingly, Kunal, you know what the first pit stop length of Max's stop was? 1.9 seconds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Yeah.
1.9. It all just
Compare
comes
that.
in together.
Yeah, compare that to George Russell's, who had a 5 second stop after that stonking start that he made. We can't not talk George
Yeah.
Russell's start. We were talking at the start, we are talking at the move that Verstappen made on Russell. Truth be told, we were all looking at, will it be Max, will it be Lando Norris? It's 600 odd meters of a drag race to the entry point of turn one. And suddenly, out of nowhere, George Russell comes on the outside and he just makes that move. He leaves enough of a gap on the inside for those two in case they get it wrong, because that's what you're scared of. That I've got the best start I could think of, I could dream of, and then oops, are those guys on the inside going to scramble on that brakes or whatever? And George Russell said he channelized his inner Fernando Alonso from 2012, and that he was dreaming of this start through the night. It just he never thought it would come to fruition.
George Russell might be great at a lot of things, including driving, bodybuilding, and flexing, mewing, if that's a thing as well. But what he's not really the best at is history, because the inner Fernando Alonso from 2012 didn't have a really good Spanish Grand Prix. 2011 and 13, now that was a good start. Who's going to
But
correct him, Kunal?
not
You
me. I'm
agree?
just happy he made that start. My goodness, I can't even remember. I just know 2013 was Fernando's last Formula One win at
Yes.
ever, and happened to be at home. But I have no clue what happened in 2011, 12, 13.
Well,
I
11,
don't
he
know.
had a great start. He just undercut a couple of drivers, got the inside line, and did something that Russell did today. But on that whole subject, I really want to put this question right. It's a tough one. We should decide this before we go recording, but here we are. You get to listen to us prepping in real time. But do we talk about Norris first or Russell? Because I believe the bigger story to cover is why Norris thinks he could have won and where he lost it almost.
I would choose Lando Norris.
Hmm. Go for it. What do you reckon happened over there? According to Lando, it was just the start. Everything else was perfect. You agree with that?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. Had he kept the lead at the start, the race could have probably seen a different narrative. Could it have seen a different outcome? One doesn't really know. It's speculation, I would say, but at least he would have had a better chance of winning, because he would have been leading from the front rather than doing the chasing that he did over the 66 laps, Sommel. So I believe Lando Norris should have kept P1. Had he kept P1 after the opening lap itself, we would have probably seen a different race play out in the Spanish Grand Prix.
I hate to be that guy, but I have to be that guy. Isn't it kind of a recurring trend now? China this year, Brazil last year, couple of races before that. I mean, Lando has certainly got his act together, but starts are still where it's a little bit concerning, especially when at the end the margin is only 2.2 seconds. And we saw that, right? He was almost able to get that McLaren faster on command. When Verstappen stopped, Norris put in the fastest first sector. When he was on the soft tires, he cut down that 8-second gap on the final stint, even though Max was not pushing. down to only 2.2. We know that car is good. And maybe, just maybe, it's just the current nature of Formula One that the starts are so important that if you just get them wrong, which Lando unfortunately has been getting them wrong, I think you've lost it completely, unless there's a safety car coming in.
That's true, and especially at a track like Barcelona. I mean, two things about the start. Last year, Red Bulls actually used the medium tire at the start.
Hmm.
You normally in Barcelona use the stickiest compound, the grippiest compound at the start because track position is so vital. Red Bull didn't have that advantage going into the 2024 Spanish Grand Prix. So they did what everyone else did, which is put on the soft. The whole field, mind you, Somil, put on the soft. Why? Because they all wanted to maximize track position at the opening round of the race. Similarly, for Lando Norris, it was the soft tire, and it just so happened that at least in my memory, uh, I can't think of, has he made bad starts all the time, or is that
Yeah, I
so?
think a
I can't.
few key races. China was one clear example. I remember, if my memory serves me correct, Qatar last year wasn't great. Neither was Brazil. Uh, but again, it's becoming a bit of a thing now. And Lando sort of acknowledged it himself at the end of the race, where he said, "Ah, just the start. I could have done better there, and it would have been us." But not just the start. I also want to put the question down onto McLaren's strategy. Now, according to some might think that McLaren did the wrong thing by keeping Lando out for longer. Do you think so? Did they sabotage themselves? Did McLaren sabotage themselves by keeping Lando Norris out for longer and putting him on a bit of a tire offset compared to Max?
So there are two ways I would look at this, Samuel. Okay, the first thing is if you're chasing Max Verstappen, you need to chase him for the 66 laps of the race, not the last six. That's
Hmm.
essentially what happened in McLaren's case. So what do I mean is,
Why would you say
yes,
that?
because you need to keep pressure on Max. You need to not let him settle down. You need
Hmm.
to. You remember Max at one point said the tires are so inconsistent. What was
Hmm.
the situation at that time? It was Max, it was George, and then Lando. Okay,
Hmm.
so the pressure was not on him as it was in the last six laps of the race. You don't just pressurize him in the last, in 10% of the race. You need to pressurize him 100% of the race, right? So
Hmm.
that's something McLaren will review. Should we have just done what everyone was doing, box at the same time, and then just trust our pace to keep up with Max Verstappen? Because that's the alternate view that
Hmm.
could have played out. Don't go on longer. Don't create the tire delta what they did. So that's one way of looking at it. But how McLaren actually saw it in real time? Let's talk of that. They realize that the two cars, the McLaren and the Red Bull, were very close in the race pace. We saw this in the free
Yeah.
practice two sessions when teams do long run sessions. In Barcelona, overtaking is difficult to happen if there is a very marginal delta of performance or
Yeah.
lap time between the two cars. We know we saw an overtaking fest, etc., but let's remember those were overtakes between cars on different tire compounds or
Yes.
cars on tires with different tire life. Okay,
Yeah.
so in the case of Norris and Verstappen, they said, why don't we just create a delta and then try and overtake him? That's literally what they tried to do. But interestingly, Norris said, forget George Russell, let's just go for Max Verstappen. To me, that was the radio message of the race weekend.
It's nice to see them thinking in the right direction. And ultimately, I don't think Norris gave up. He just was practical about it. At that point, had you not made that pit stop and not covered Russell, you wouldn't have even potentially gotten second. Actually, you might have gotten second, but with a lot more hard work. And why do you want to do that anyway, right? You just do things in life to make life easier for the future, which is what McLaren did. But the whole point here is I don't think you can blame McLaren for going for the alternate tire delta in the way they did. Because quite simply, had they not gone for clean air, that car would have ultimately had so many heat issues. The tires would have been hotter, the brakes would have been hotter, and the performance ultimately slows down. So, on McLaren's part, it was sort of fair to offset things a little bit, maybe hope that Lando can be exponentially faster in clean air, and that to me was a sign of McLaren believing in their car, believing that if we are in the clean air, maybe we can go faster than the Red Bull. That belief speaks volumes. And I like that from McLaren. They're taking their chances.
Absolutely. And Sommel, they were the quickest car on track when it came to clean air, right? That's what also Max Verstappen was fearing towards the end of the race. But I think Max eventually had it all under control. He's done this 61 times in life,
Yeah.
remember. Whereas if we were to now consider McLaren, I think they scored a podium for the first time at this circuit since
2011.
2011.
Yeah.
And Lando Norris, for the first time, moves into P2 in the Drivers' Championship for the first time. Uh, I think it's McLaren's sixth consecutive podium. It's the longest run again since 2011 2012. And Lando Norris is the only driver to finish in the points in every Grand Prix in 2024. Do you want one more?
Of course I do. Of course I do.
Verstappen and Norris have finished 1, 2 in either order. Either Norris is one or Verstappen is second or whatever. Of course, but Verstappen has one more. So they've finished 1, 2 for the fifth time in the last 6 races.
They don't pay you the big bucks at Viaplay for nothing, huh?
Well,
See, this is good digging. This is good digging, by the way, folks. After only 10 minutes of the race ending, I'm not even kidding you. The race
yeah.
just got finished, and then I had a quick shower. By the time Kunal's done so much of digging that we can bring you these numbers in almost real time. Great
Yeah,
stuff,
and
brother.
this is exactly why people love to watch races with us, Somal. So when we host our events in India, across Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, we have a packed audience just because of the way you, Sundaram, myself, we are able to dig in through data, we are able to dig in through stats, we're able to understand what's actually happening beyond what we get to see on television, and we absolutely love taking Formula One fans on the same journey that we've been on for several years now.
Yeah, and now that you've mentioned that, we're kind of missing Sundaram now. It's been a while, man. I mean, just hoping that he gets well soon enough and comes back with us to share all of his incredible numbers and stories very, very shortly. But another incredible story that we have to talk about is Russell channeling his correction inner 2013 Fernando Alonso and getting P1 in what has to be one of the best starts ever after Fernando Alonso. But why did it not work out is a question that I kept asking myself in the middle of the race constantly. It was meant to work out, right? Russell had track position. If anything, P2 would have been okay. In terms of raw pace, of course, Lando was faster. At some point in time, he would have gotten past owing to the nature of the circuit and tire wear. And so Lando would have created a delta. He would have gotten past George. But losing P3? And I just get a feeling that Mercedes sabotaged him by putting him on the hard tires. There was no
Wow.
need. And I'll back up my statement with a quote by Lewis Hamilton. In the post race interview, David Coulthard asked Lewis Hamilton, Lewis, was the decision to go on soft, medium, soft a choice that you made on your own, or was it brought by the team? He said, it was always meant to be soft, medium, soft for me, which means it would have most likely also most would have been soft, medium, soft for George. Correct. I mean, conventional logic says that because that's what all the teams would have wanted to do. I can't imagine a world in which Russell would have voluntarily said, after seeing the performance of the hard tires in the practice, that no, I will not do this. Instead, I will go for the hard compound tires. Why would he do that?
I think we'll know in due course. We've recorded too close to the race for the teams to sort of, or the drivers to sort of turn around and tell us why they actually made the decision. But yes, in the end, it was that hard tire stint. He did 30 laps on that hard tire, just a little under half race distance, which caught him off. But could George Russell have won the race? No, I don't believe so. I think Max and Lando Norris would have anyway jumped him. But I believe George Russell would have finished third. That would have happened. Mercedes actually finished third and fourth for the second consecutive race. So their upgrades actually, for the first time, apart from all the PR machinery and the statements that come, seem to be working across two different variations of circuit, very drastic variations that we explained in the preview. Montreal, shorter corner ranges in terms of speeds, but Spain is the ultimate test that you'd want to put a Formula One car through. Also, George Russell, I believe, has led the opening lap in the last two Grand Prix. Okay,
Does
because he was,
he?
of course, on pole last race weekend, and then by I think just about 2 milliseconds, he was ahead of Lewis. No, he lost P3 to Lewis Hamilton. Either way, but I think it was. I don't think there was sabotage. I'd love to see where it goes, but Pirelli did say that the soft, medium, soft, or the soft, hard, soft would have been the ultimate strategy. I think Mercedes maybe just decided to split their options at that time. And they realized that George's hards were not working, which is why it became even easier to choose the soft for Lewis Hamilton.
Uh, but my question here is why would you put the driver with the better track position on the tire that has notably been worse all throughout the weekend? We'll find out. Of
Yeah,
course,
okay.
Mercedes will tell us why.
I can add one data point. So
Sure.
the track temperatures were not as hot on Sunday as they were on Friday. When they were extremely hot on Friday, the hard was degrading worse than expected. In cooler conditions, the hard was not expected to be as bad.
Hmm.
Okay, so in a way, it was probably, and Spain happens to be one of those race weekends where all three tire compounds end up being used. One of those rare race weekends because it was not just George Russell, but Carlos Sainz used the soft, then the medium, then the hard. Pierre Gasly did that. Ocon, Hulkenberg. So several drivers actually did do that. It just so happened that it wasn't the right tire for George Russell to be on if he wanted to score a third position in Spain.
And Lewis Hamilton now has 198 podiums. 198,
Wow.
beating the former great podium record held by Sir Lewis Hamilton himself of 197 podiums. 198 is mind blowing. I,
And his first of 2024. To me, that's more
yes,
mind blowing. Yeah.
exactly. It baffles me. And of course, the moment after he was done with the race, he firstly thanked the team, which is great to see that the bond is still somewhat there. And great to hear Toto Wolff, Pete Bonington, and Lewis Hamilton on the radio at the same time, not complaining, which is incredible. But I just sort of feel that it was again passed on in a little bit because of Russell's hardly ideal strategic call, but then also because Ferrari were nowhere. And that to me is surprising. I Have we gotten down to the bottom of why that was the case? I mean, terrible in qualifying, not really much in the race. There's no word from them on why that happened.
And they didn't have the best Canadian Grand Prix either. But just
Yeah.
one word on Lewis Hamilton before, and before we sort of move on to Ferrari. But Lewis Hamilton, first podium, P3 in qualifying. It seemed like the Lewis of the old that we are so used to. He was so gracious in the post race radio with the team. He actually complimented their pit stops. He said, "Keep up with the great training, lovely pit stops." Okay, so he complimented the driver,
Yeah.
the mechanics on the pit stops. Then he also, of course, he was Lando Norris at the fastest lap of the race. So he told Mercedes, "I think I could have gotten the fastest lap of the race had we pushed for it as well." So he
Hmm.
literally was in a great mode. But coming to Ferrari, they just claimed they were lacking grip overall and they were lacking pace. And what they started to do when you lack pace, and this is typical not just of Ferrari but anyone, is you just start cycling through your tires much faster. Okay,
Yeah.
so you run out of pace and then you pit earlier, and then of course it gives a false notion that you've pitted and you're trying to undercut someone, but the truth is you're just trying to you're just trying to cycle through your tires, want fresh rubber to go through, or to have more pace. But George Russell said 30 laps on the hard was actually extremely long for him then to contend with, because that's what happened. At least in the case with Leclerc, they could do a soft, medium, soft, which is what the top three drivers also ran.
Hmm.
Eventually, it's just Ferrari probably going backwards with all the upgrades. And good point, Samuel. Here, you and I have discussed it that the upgrades sound like they're an upgrade on the car, but they could also be downgrades as well.
They really could because sometimes you believe that upgrades will always improve the car, but sometimes they just don't work in your favor because reality is often disappointing. A and B, simulation and reality sometimes can be a little bit different to what you actually think they are going to be, which is surprising for Ferrari in a big way. And I hate to say it, but I called for it. We told you before the race that when a driver heads into a home race without a seat for the following year, they don't get on the podium. Case in point, Nico Hulkenberg, Germany 2019, Felipe Massa, Brazil 2013, and Logan Sargent at every single American Grand Prix since the start of his career. Carlos Sainz has just added himself onto that list, and it's a stat that I will never forget and I will bring up once again in our mid-season awards. Along with also the fact that there was a fire this weekend, another one in Spain. Two in
Yeah,
12 years now?
12, yes, 2012. That I
Yeah,
remember. Past the Maldonado.
yeah,
Everyone was wondering if this could be an omen that Williams could win. They actually had one of the worst race weekends ever. I think Alexander Albon first ever Q1 exit of the year and already happened on Saturday. And then, funnily enough, I think at F1 was testing their on-track graphics, and they put out Logan Sargent first win in Formula One, and then everyone pointed out even
Way.
more, saying, "Is this the omen that there was a fire, and then could this lead to a Williams win?" Which is what
Mm.
happened in 2012. But no, in all seriousness, very glad nobody got injured because everything in the paddock is so close by, and Mario Isola was one of the first responders. He ran in with one of the fire extinguishers. And Samuel, if we remember, during the pandemic, he was driving around an ambulance helping people cope with whatever the world went through back in 2020.
Did that really happen?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I was not aware of that.
It
That's
did. Yeah. He
that's
was to
crazy.
drive, I think it was in Milan, and he's trained. He was very clear. I'm not trained as a fire officer, but as a first responder. And Pirelli, of course, then turned around and said, "We all teams compete on track." I believe a lot of teams helped McLaren with food, so their team could be sort of fed through the weekend.
That's
And we
lovely.
will have several good stories that will eventually come out between now and Austria, I believe, because Formula One did come together, the other 9 teams and Liberty Media and Pirelli and everybody else who has support paddocks did come together to help McLaren because there was a story. Lando Norris ran out in his socks and he
Yeah.
even left his shoes in there and so on. He was camping in Zach Brown's office, whereas Oscar Piastri was in one of the engineering offices in the truck and so on.
Oh, we. Well, is there a fire at Red Bull Racing as well? Because weirdly, Sergio Perez has been complimented for a race that's hardly brilliant or inspiring. What's the word you'd be using for Perez's performance this weekend? Or what did Horner use? Actually, I'm more curious.
Christian Horner actually complimented him, saying it was a strong race performance because Checo qualified 8th, started 11th after a grid penalty from Canada, which I believe was team inflicted, right,
Hmm.
during traffic or something, and then just shows, it was so close that even in a dominant Red Bull, if you're not fighting up ahead, you could just be where Perez is, which is finish eighth, which is the last of all the top four finishers. Okay. And this is despite PS3 having a really bad weekend, one of the first bad weekends that I can remember in his 1.5 years in Formula One. But
Yeah.
Checo Perez started 11th. He ran a 3-stop race.
Sure.
Okay. And he ran a soft, soft, medium, soft. Okay. To finish eighth. He was actually he overtook Pierre Gasly on the last lap of the race. He finished 25 seconds behind Oscar Piastri, which is literally the pit lane time loss plus the extra stop he would have made. So he
Yeah.
sort of to get the fresh rubber, he did that. But yeah, so it was Red Bull think it was a good race for him, which yeah. Anyway, there we go. But he
Uh,
got some points.
the, uh, I fail to find a good analogy for that. Where, no, I know. You know where the older child really has to do so much just to get the acceptance of the parents, and the younger one, weirdly, just has to be alive to get all the love from them. It's kind of similar to that, where you just be there, just be alive, finish the race, and you've done a good job. Oh my precious, I don't get it.
Incredible, right?
I don't get it. I don't get it. Do we want to talk about Alpine and Aston Martin very quickly? Because the run order between the two of them has really been reversed badly. With this weekend, we saw Alpine getting into the points. We saw actually
Both
two
the
Alpines
cars.
getting in the
Yeah,
points.
first
Yeah.
time ever.
And getting them into Q3 as well, which was also incredible. We saw the V carbs being nowhere, and Fernando Alonso struggling for grip at Barcelona. I never thought I'd say this after the McLaren days, but here we are. What just happened there, Kunal?
Well, weak up got upgrades, and it seems that the correlation is a problem, which is why they were just completely out of the setup window, which is why Sunoda for once also struggled, I would say. I would say also because if you see Yuki Tsunoda, he finished 14th today, which is also what he finished in the opening round in Bahrain.
Yeah.
But he's always had point scoring finishes. In fact, he's had more point scoring finishes than any other midfield driver, I believe. I don't even need to check the stat. I probably know that.
Yeah.
But it was just down to setup, I would say, if we may leave it at that. I would say Aston Martin just didn't have the pace. Fernando Alonso said they were just sliding too much in the high speed corners, which is why the tire degradation was extremely high. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's just so happened that it was Fernando Alonso's home race. And I think Aston Martin clearly have been leapfrogged, at least in this race, by Alpine, the other team that you mentioned. But Fernando Alonso has gone without scoring points for the third time in the last four races. Right?
Wow.
If we were to look at how it goes, it's isn't it strange? Fernando of all people
Yeah.
is not scoring points or incredible. But anyway,
When his former team, which were apparently overweight and had internal conflicts, have got both their cars quietly in the points. That's even more baffling for me. And Aston
yeah,
Martin were touted to be the favourites. They were touted to get Adrian Newey, new factory and all, and it has just been sliding down. I'm
it
actually
has.
curious.
Yeah,
Yeah, you were saying?
go on, go. No, no, go on.
I'm actually curious to see where the improvements on the Alpine have genuinely come. Is it just the weight? Have they found anything new with some new upgrades? And I mean, it'll be fun to hear what the team principals eventually say when we have a sit down interview with them. But that is a big mystery about how they've leapfrogged so many people at the circuit, which normally reveals the most about the long term potential of every car in Formula One.
And I think that's what Alpine will actually say is their positive, that of all the circuits that they got a double Q3 and double points finish, it was Barcelona, the biggest litmus test for a Formula One car, as we'll put it. It has been overweight. They're trying to bring in all the upgrades. They've got Flavio Briatore, who we should at some
Mm.
point talk about. The biggest blot in the history of the sport has actually been brought back to Alpine to help them recover their fortunes. But Alpine now moves ahead of Haas
Oh,
and into seventh place in the Constructors' Championship. Pierre Gasly has scored for the third consecutive race now. So after a slower start than even Esteban Ocon, he actually has scored points as well. He finished ahead of Ocon. But there was one more team you actually asked about. Alpine, wasn't it? Yeah, can't
no, no,
remember.
no, no, no. Haas. They had
Haas,
another
yes.
podium. Sorry, not podium. They had another penalty.
They
Naturally, another
a
double
false
penalty.
start a false start for Magnussen,
Yeah.
speeding in the pit lane for Magnussen, and speeding in the pit lane for Nico Hulkenberg. But the positive is Nico Hulkenberg finished, I think it was 11th for the 11th for the fourth time in a race weekend, I think. So it's imagine you're not scoring points, but you're finishing 11th, which I think is pretty fabulous.
I mean, if that's the target you're chasing, sure. But
But
then
I
again, they're
guess,
Haas, right? So we
yeah.
should be a little kinder.
In fact, it's I would say five times that he's finished 11th. So he's been so close yet so far. But my favorite stat about Aston Martin, because Haas finished ahead of Aston Martin this weekend. Okay,
Yeah.
uh, on lap 52 or 58 actually of a 66 lap Grand Prix,
Hmm.
Fernando Alonso in his Aston Martin was 17 seconds behind Nico Hulkenberg in the Haas in 11th place. Shocking, I would
Shocking.
say.
Yeah. How far have they fallen? Seriously. Seriously. Man, it's quite a
No
story.
points. Yes. But is that it? 35 minutes in, are we going to call it an end and look forward to Austria in a couple of days' time?
I think we should. I think we should because if we don't, I'll be getting a call from work saying, Somil, you've not showed up even though you were supposed to 30 minutes ago. But we were talking Formula One. That is the perfect way to end
And
your day, is it not?
it's the perfect way to end the podcast. But your day begins now because
Yeah.
Samuel Aurora is working with the Sony Sports Network on the broadcast of the Euros. And for all those listening to the Euros in India, there are certain times you will hear Samuel's voice actually during the Euros broadcast.
Yes, indeed. It's so exciting. It's so exciting. So I'll get back to the football for the next couple of days, but we'll be back in a few more days to talk about Austria, which comes up in 5 days from now. So another episode should be here in 3 or 4 odd days. We'll
It's
be
a
there
sprint
only.
weekend. So, yeah, it's a sprint weekend.
Oh boy, even more fun. That'll be lovely. But subscribe to the Inside Line F1 podcast. That's where you'll hear the first of us with our episodes as well, and also on all of our social media pages too. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I'll rush off to work. You better enjoy your day and you better enjoy the greatness of Max because you're going to get that every single weekend. Take care, folks. Bye bye.